Welcome to the Ins and Outs podcast, where today we're going to be diving into the ins and outs of the foster care system. The big question that we want to answer by the end of our podcast today is the foster care system overall good or bad for children who are at risk? We want to make a little disclaimer and say that in all of our research, we have sought to be very unbiased in everything that we have said. And our goal is to remain neutral until our research proves a certain side. So all that to be said, Dana Crutchfield is a woman who we interviewed. She is a mom of 2 kids who she adopted through the foster care system. And at the beginning of our interview with her, she actually states that there will never be an ideal system. And she kind of goes on to say, and I'll paraphrase what she says, that the foster care system is founded on brokenness because children should never have to be taken away from their original home, their original parents. That was not God's intention for what family is. And so that alone is broken in and of itself. And so any system or organization or people who try to combat that and fix it will be very hard and very complex because it's just a broken issue that we're all working with here. That to be said, I would like to now state some of our data and statistics that we found through our online research. One of which is a quote from a woman named Brenda Keller. She works with suicide prevention for youth in the foster care system, and she quotes that studies show that youth in foster care are 2.5 times more likely to contemplate suicide than youth who are not in it. And they're actually 4 times more likely to attempt or commit suicide.
Some other statistics that we found, just generally, kids in foster care, they've dealt with homelessness. Some between the ages of 17 and 19 experience early parenthood. And then one of the most common ages for kids going into the foster care system is between ages 1 and 5, which is very young. Those are some of the most pivotal years for development. And so to be taken from your parents between those ages, any age, but especially between those ages, is very, it carries a lot of weight. And then it was surprising to hear that only 1 in 4 kids who left foster care in 2021 were actually adopted by a family, which is a lot lower than personally I had anticipated seeing. In our interview with Dana, we asked her about some of the positive things that her children may have taken away from the foster care system, hoping to find like we said, both the positive and the negative, just find the truth of the whole situation. And when we asked her about the positive things, she said that she can't really think of anything for her kids specifically. That's not to say that'll be the case for every situation. One thing after she said that she couldn't really think of anything positive was that her kids are good at talking to people and being around new people. Which could be viewed as good, but also it comes from more of the negative thing where they've been kind of forced to meet new people and to be around new people all the time. So it's more that they've gotten used to it, not so much that they've actually learned that skill in a healthy way.
Yeah, and then from that question, we actually asked her, how do you think the time that your children spent throughout this whole process has impacted their life as a child, their worldview, their personality, their fears, all of these kind of things, like how did the foster care system impact them? And the biggest thing that she emphasized was trust. A lot of lack of trust and attachment issues towards adults and just them, like her and her husband experience a lot of challenge in trying to connect with them and trying to grow any kind of bond with them because they're just so closed off to any kind of close-knit relationship, especially with adults. And she kind of, said that this is obviously due to the amount of change in their development years, of they were always just passed on and passed on and passed on. They never had consistent people, not even their own parents, who were consistently there, who loved them, who were taking care of them. And so this really has impacted the way that they view everything. And she even goes on to say that they don't even understand what the concept of adoption really is, even though they have been adopted for multiple years now at this point. And Dana tells them, like, you're not going back into the system, like, you're staying here, like we are your parents now. They don't understand that really, and they still, face struggles of lacking in trust that that's actually true, that they won't be passed on to another family, that they won't leave, that Dana and her husband won't leave them at some point. They really don't believe that. And so she emphasized that a lot, which is really traumatizing for any child, to have to feel so alone, and to feel so like they have no foundation, that like they have no stability in their life, even when people are telling them that they do have it now. And then from that question, we then kind of asked, has your child ever experienced abuse, or even just like any kind of treatment in this kind of care? And she said that, her kids have never experienced physical abuse in these homes, at least that she knows, or that they can recount. She did say that her daughter says that the first home that she was in, all that she remembers from it is that she feels really bad about it. She almost has like this weird feeling about the first home, and it's all negative feelings. I don't know if this is due to her daughter not remembering what happened at that home, or because she doesn't want to say what happened at that home. Dana is not really sure herself, but she does say that, she doesn't really know what happened there, but it could have been abusive. She doesn't really know. And since she was so young, she herself may not really have full memory of what happened right now, at least. And then from that, we went into our big question almost, that is, Dana, if you could go into this system and change it in any way, what would you change? And she said two big things. The biggest thing that she talked about is that she said that the foster care needs to be way more transparent in the way that they train foster parents. She mentioned that they were almost in a way lied to when they kind of went through training of like, that won't happen in your house. Don't worry about this kind of like behavioral issue or this kind of trauma. Like, that won't happen. Like, don't worry about that. When that's exactly what they experienced. And so they felt very prepared. And even Dana said that apart from her training, she did years of research before they ever chose to adopt children. She read so many books. She talked to people. She had so much information under her belt, but she said all of that did not prepare her for the reality of what it's like to deal with foster children, because of the amount of trauma that they have. It's just so immense. And, from this, we were curious. So we looked up some of the websites about foster care, and there was 3 specific ones that we looked at, and all of them were just as Dana, told us. They just paint such a positive, hopeful picture of, join us and become a foster parent, and you can change the lives of all of these children for the better, blah blah blah. And as much as that is true, and there is hope in that statement, and there might be a little bit truth there if you really do it well to have a positive effect on these kids, but they just do not prepare anyone how difficult this really is. And even the website is just riddled with smiling pictures of all these kids who look so happy and parents who look so happy, and all of the websites are so colorful and they look so pretty and so nice and so welcoming, and it just is not truthful to what the reality of it is. And then from that, another thing that she said was something that she really thinks should be changed is the amount of time that kids are spending in this kind of system. She said that even when she told the caseworker, like, we want to adopt them, her 2 children, it took them a year to finalize that adoption. And she was just saying how that was baffling, about how, you know, they were willing to take these kids in immediately and take them out of that state of not knowing where they'll be next and what will happen, and to give them a home. And they just made it so much harder than it had to be. And the foster care workers could have just done it so much more quicker than it happened. And a quote from Dana herself, she says that children shouldn't be in a state of limbo for as long as her kids were. She states that they were in this constant state of not knowing where they're going to be, even just like next week, let alone next year, what school they're going to be going to, who's going to take care of them, who their caseworker is. There's so much uncertainty, and that is such a scary thing for so many children. And actually from that, through our research, we found some more stories about actual kids who have been through the foster care system and now they're out, and what they have to say about their personal experience as a child in it. And this girl's named Caroline. She's now way aged out of it at this point, but she wrote a journal article about what her experience was, and she says this: as I look back on those years, it feels like there's a mixture of good and bad experiences. However, one of the most difficult parts was not knowing what was going to happen to me. And so she goes on to talk about how she felt like she couldn't trust anyone, how there was no one that she could talk to. She actually experienced a lot of abuse in these homes that she was in. In fact, she actually became pregnant at the age of 14 in the foster care system. So she has a lot of negative experiences. However, she does, highlight positives about how she has really fond memories of homes that were really loving and nurturing to her. However, I think it really stood out that the most difficult part was not knowing what was going to happen, because that's exactly what Dana said about her own children. Just this whole state of what's going to happen is so traumatizing for so many people, especially at such a young age. From that, she didn't say that this was a main thing, but she did mention the system of aging out and how she thinks that it definitely could be helped. She does think that it's a little bit wrong that the minute that someone is aged out, they're just kind of left to figure it out on their own because they don't have any space. And she emphasized a lot that it's really not the foster care system's fault. They just don't have a lot of resources. And she talked about that a lot, of that there's just no resources. Like, even if they wanted to house all these kids in perfectly awesome homes that would love them well, they can only put a home or put a child into a home that is willing to foster children, and that's not a lot, honestly. But she talks about how the system of aging out is really hard to reconcile with. And from that, another story that we found is a man named Mr. Cancel. He is actually now a founder of an organization that's dedicated to changing the foster care system in America. And he really only has negative experiences, but he was in the foster care since he was 11 months old to 23 years old. And he was very upset about his time there because he was constantly moved, was never adopted. And finally, when he aged out, his sister actually found him and connected him to his aunt and uncle that lived about an hour and a half away from where he was in this foster home. And he found out that his aunt and uncle were fostering parents and adoptive parents. So they were a home that was fostering kids and willing to adopt kids, his own family. And, the foster care says that they try to connect you back with family, that they look for all close relatives, but in his case, they failed to do this. And he could have been out of the foster care probably right when he was a baby if they would have contacted his aunt and uncle. And so he was really upset about this, and he says that this system, quote unquote, failed him. And so now he's dedicated his whole life in trying to fix it.
And finally, we asked her if she would say the foster care system was overall a good and a beneficial environment for her kids, or if it was overall negative. And for her, she said that it was overall good and her kids needed to be removed from the home. It was also good because it got her kids to where they needed to be and into a safe and loving home. But she also recognized that this was not the reality for every family or for every child. Foster care, it really depends on the child and on each individual situation. So it's not going to look the same for everyone.
Yeah, and what we have found through our research and our interview and talking with Dana and reading the stories of others who have lived it out as a child themselves, we have recognized that there is trauma on both sides. There's trauma whether you stay in the home with the abusive parents, with the neglect, with the drug addictions, but there's also trauma when you're placed in the foster care with the constant changing, with the constant being placed in new homes, being passed around, feeling like no one loves you, like no one's there, like no one's listening, like you can't trust anyone. All of this is also very traumatic for any child. And so we still honestly don't have a concise conclusion from all of our research, because what we have found is that it is so subjective to everyone's own experience, own situation, and own circumstance. But what we have come to find out is that both sides are traumatic, whether they stay at home or they are placed in a new home. And it's kind of just figuring out what is the best of two evils and what is the best situation for a child who is going to experience trauma in both ways. It's almost like an oxymoron of saying what trauma is better for them, but that honestly is the question that it comes down to. And that's what we found with all of our research, with speaking with Dana. That's what it comes down to, and that's what we found. Thank you.